Welcome to the Parlor car. Hope everybody's had a good time so far. We thank you all for your support, and we've been looking forward to this roundtable discussion for some time. We just want to let everybody know it is being streamed live, and we have several people that are watching, so we appreciate that. We are going to be doing audience participation. If you ask a question, if you could wait for the microphone, because we want everybody here and who's streaming live to be able to hear both the question and then the answer. And so we're privileged to have a nice array of builders and importers with us tonight. I just wanted to remind everybody, if you got a copy of your book, and you should have got one of these certificate of authenticities. I was there, 2016 Brass Expo, Chicago, Illinois, and you are here. And if you haven't yet, take the opportunity and right after this little roundtable, come up and get all the guys to autograph your book. It'll turn it into a collectible. So anyways, we'll just start by kind of going around, and we're going to have everybody introduce themselves, and then we're going to open it up to audience participation, and just take advantage to ask any questions that you may have. So we'll start here to my right.
Tom Marsh with Overland Models and Classic Mint Collectibles.
I'm Jack Vansworth. I'm the Division Point. I've been that for about 25 years, I suppose, roughly.
Jimmy Booth, PBL and Glacier Park Models. This is Seho Chang. I am from Korea. I am manufacturer in Korea, Podium Precision. Nice to meet you.
I'm Chuck Stead, Union Terminal Imports.
Just Fred, the Coach Yard.
Changher, Samuel Tex, the builder in Korea.
I'm Lee Marsh from Lee Marsh Model Company from Scotland.
Boo.
Boo.
I'm George Coase with Coase & Company and have been producing O-scale for about 16 years, and before that was involved with fine art models.
Very good. So we're happy to have such a nice group with us, aren't we? So at this point, we'd just like to open it up to the audience. What questions would you like to ask? It can be about something that's happened in the history, because there's a great knowledge here of what's happened. It can be really about anything. So whatever you want to know about brass models, how they were made, how they were produced, issues that may happen. If you want to just tell them your favorite model and ask questions about that, that's fine too. So who'd like to open it up? Okay, we have one right here, Brandon, if we could bring the mic.
Oh, I thought his name was Mike.
Well, I'm going to a lot of train shows, and I'm wondering about the new blood, because I see a lot of kids carrying around the iPhones, and I'm concerned about their conviction model railroading, and so anybody comment on that?
All right, we'll start with Fred.
Hey, Mike. Where's Mike?
He's coming.
Thank you, Mike. First off, I own a retail store, and I get a lot of kids that come in that store, and they start off with Thomas the Tank and work their way up. And it still works to this day. I've been in business, I hate to say how long, but I started in 1976 in retail, and I have seen the progression come in where I have seen the children in 1976 now be grandparents. But it does work. Kids come in and they know Thomas the Tank, and out of the 100 that know Thomas, 2 will buy an HO train set, and out of that, 1 will become a model railroader. So it does work today.
Chuck.
I want to talk about what we do at the Santa Clara Depot Club in Santa Clara, California. Bill Burkett is with me for the weekend, and Bill and I and a lot of other members really take in the younger people, and we spend a lot of time with them. Our club emphasizes, we have about 110 members, and we emphasize youth membership. We make the layout available to the young people most of the day on Saturday and a big part of the evening on Tuesday night. I personally sit at a folding table in the museum section of the depot every Saturday from 10 to 3. I carry a toolbox with me that has virtually every tool you'd need for model railroading, and I have a soldering iron I keep in a locker at the club and other tools, and I'm available to everybody from 7-year-olds with their grandfather to teenagers and adults who need to and want to acquire modeling skills. And so we really work hard at bringing young people into the hobby, and I'm very pleased to tell you that we've got 3 or 4 of our teenagers now who have acquired their first, second, and in one case third brass steam engine. And we teach them how to make them run well, and we teach them how to put DCC in them. And so we're working hard on getting them going, and I think it's incumbent on all of us who are in this hobby to do anything we can to help the youth come into the hobby.
Good job, Chuck. And I think, Lee, we wanted to get your...
I'd like to add to what Chuck said.
Okay, we'll get Lee. We'll get you first, okay?
Back home in Scotland, I am involved in the preservation scene, and normally for kids, that's their first experience of a steam engine, is seeing the real thing on a preservation railway. We're very lucky in the UK that we have a lot of preservation railways, and we do Thomas the Tank Engine days, and okay, by the end of the day, you're really sick and tired of picking kids up and letting them blow the whistle. You know, some of the kids are a little big and the back goes after a while, but well, that's true as well. 43 going on George's age. But one of the things is my son is just coming up to 2 years old this month, and he loves trains, and you know, as much as that's fantastic for me, I'm very happy as his dad. I can't force him to do that, but it's not through me forcing him. You can't force kids. It's through showing your own enthusiasm without being pushy, you know, without, you know, trying to sort of say you must do this, you must do that, and encouraging kids. And sometimes in the hobby, especially when it comes to the expensive brass models, we can get a little bit precious. Don't go near that, don't touch this, don't do that. But that's the wrong thing to do. Under supervision, you can get a kid to get really interested. I soldered my first model locomotive when I was 12 years old, and there was a guy in the Model Railway Club, saw I was interested, basically took me under his wing and encouraged me and said, yeah, I'll teach you how to solder, or solder, and yeah, you guys say it wrong. And that encouragement, building a model and soldering it and making it and painting it and doing the whole thing at 12 years old, that was a really big thing. Now, he didn't have to do that. You know, I was basically a real pain in the neck, as I still am, but he did, and that took me on. And now I've been making models professionally for 21 years, and I really do believe we've got to encourage young people. Back in the UK, I've got a friend of mine who's an amazing model maker, Maggie Gravitt. And she goes around schools and she teaches kids with some simple polystyrene and some simple plastic kits how to make little dioramas and so on. And the boys and girls, they just love this, because my son, as I say, is coming up to 2 years old. He can work an iPhone already, okay? So he is like already no problem at all, as kids can do now. So when they get a chance to actually use their hands and somebody's patient with them, and this is the real key, it just makes all the difference. So do the best you can, you know, at any opportunity you can, whether it's grandkids, friends' kids, whatever. We need new blood. In this business, you have entry-level stuff, and I guess in America it's going to be Atlas, for example, in O-scale. That's great, because everybody, human nature, basically, you always look for something better and something better. And if you're encouraged, eventually you get to brass. And I've spent my life as a young kid, I always looked for what was the best. And that's what drove me into this hobby, into this business. So the youth are really, really, really important. I fit really well in this audience with the grey hair, but I'm only 43, honest. So yeah, do the best you can. It's the only way to make this hobby last, and it has to be lots of fun as well. That's the other important thing. Make it fun. Sometimes you might get a little bit grumpy. The kids are annoying you with your precious little brass model, but introduce them to it. Tell them how fragile it is, how important it is, how expensive, whatever you have to do. But make them see the detail. Make them enjoy the fact that your brass model, for example, if you're a grandfather, this is something precious, this is something, and show them photographs of the real thing and then your model so they can connect it. Kids ain't dumb. If a 2-year-old can work an iPhone, they can figure this stuff out. So, that's what I would say from that. So.
Thank you, Lee. Hey, we found out earlier Jimmy had his first big boy when he was still in his crib.
But I want to say one thing. Have all your children go to Lee's booth and handle the models.
It's easier for him with O scale. So yeah, sure. Let's get a mic over here, Brandon.
Okay. I belong to the South Bay Railroad Historical Society also, and I call that do not load Chuck's Home Shop for Repair. They used to put those labels on the cars. But something important, we do have senior members that shun the youngsters and don't touch my train. If it derails, you leave it alone, this and that. And Chuck knows my grandson, Jake, he started running when he was 5 years old. He's 7. And I had a senior member absolutely aghast that he was running my brass SP Officers Special. And I said, no problem. He knows how to run it. He can do it. And he asked me one time, I've taught him how to handle brass. And Jake asked me, he goes, Grandpa, what if I drop it? I said, it's only a thing. And if you drop it by accident, we can fix it. No worries. Because I don't want him to be afraid to handle brass. There you go. Okay? So they need encouragement. Another thing I have done, I have taken him and junior members at our museum. This is train show season is starting now, going before Christmas. I'll take 2 or 3 of these youngsters and go to like the International Train Show in Roseville, California, and they start there. Fine, they can pick up, some guys selling used trains, they can pick up 5 plastic cars for $20, and kids can do that, and then they got something to start to work with. And then lastly, as Chuck saw just the other day, the Thomas layout in my living room on the carpet changes weekly. Between Jake and his little sister, the layout plan is always different, but it always makes sense. They put the switches. He even created in Thomas, he created a shoe funk and a runaround, so the train would run around the layout and then reverse direction. No problem. So encourage the youth. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. Brandon, can you bring that over to John, please? John Glab.
My comment is to all of you on the panel. You're all talking about getting the youth to run trains. Is anybody running trains here today? No.
No, yes. I think that would be a yes with a lot of these guys. Yeah.
No, I'm saying, is there anything here to demonstrate running trains on a model layout?
Yeah.
You have a staff of people here, not a staff, but a collection of people here who are in the business of making model trains. Who are you making the models for? If you're not running them, you're making them for the collectors who want to display them. If you're making them for the collectors who want to display them, then what in the world are you talking about the youth for?
George?
Quite frankly, I think the Brass Expo is a very unique situation as opposed to the NMRA National Train Show, all the other miscellaneous shows that happen around the country. So I don't think that this is a venue that is conducive or is necessarily requiring the operation of model trains. It's more an effort of learning more about brass, the history of brass, as you spoke about earlier, the origins of brass, and where the brass hobby is headed more directly. The point that I was originally going to make was that I've done a lot of shows in Europe. I've done shows in the UK, Switzerland, Germany, and the atmosphere at those shows is totally different than any show I've ever been to in the United States. The show I went to last in Cologne, Germany, in November of 2014, where I met this wonderful person. In 2.5 days, they put over 70,000 people through that show. Men, women, and children. The most important aspect of it, and I was so impressed by what was going on, that unlike a lot of shows that are held here where they ban strollers from the aisles and they make a point of putting signs up, children not allowed, children don't touch, children don't do this, children don't do that. The shows in Europe are fostering the kids' activity by providing very interactive activities throughout the show. That show in Cologne, they had approximately 16 different locations throughout the show where kids could come and draw trains, they could build cities out of Legos, they could operate trains. Basically, every aspect you can think of, the kids were drawing in. Some kids don't necessarily like the trains, but they may like putting buildings together. They may like doing scenery.
What does this have to do with brass?
What does what have to do with brass?
The phenomena that you are explaining.
Are brass trains part of the model railroad hobby?
But the kids aren't.
What kids aren't?
I'm saying you go to a train show in Europe, and it's going to be Markland primarily.
No, you're wrong.
And then there's Roco and Fleischmann and other things.
Keep on going.
But you still don't have a preponderance of brass.
No, actually, at Cologne, there was all the major European brass suppliers are at Cologne as well.
Micromedicaid?
Yep.
Yeah.
Right.
All there. So obviously, first of all, you need to know what you're talking about before you start.
So George,
You're not explaining.
guys, we want to get Adam. Let's have Adam comment. Now, I'm going to close with a comment too, but here's a young man who might be able to shed a little light.
Hey everybody, I'm Adam Pomerantz, and I run some groups on Facebook, and I have YouTube channels and a lot of stuff on Facebook.
And you just heard 3 words to answer a lot of your questions right there.
Yeah. Facebook groups. We have the Brass Collectors, and not that I'm necessarily a 100% collector. I run almost everything I have, but our group has 250 people at the moment. We had another group with 1,000, and a lot of young people. I'm sitting here with J.S. Camilla, who is, how old are you? 21. Okay, I'm 19. Probably one of the youngest people in this room right now. That Facebook and YouTube is the future. It's the only way to get the products out there and to show people what brass can offer. I run everything. I show people how it runs. I've been doing live videos here all day. I've had one of the videos already has like 200, 300 viewers, and lots of questions are coming in. I even posted a photo that this was starting, and I said, if you guys have questions, I'll ask them for you. And here I am.
Thank you. Good. So, Denny, we want to get Denny to have a thought here. He's had his hand up a few times.
My question is for two of the distinguished guys on the panel, Tom Marsh and Fred Hill. I've known you fellas and done business for, I think, 40 years. What I always wanted to ask both of you, and in our talks all the time, I never do. Tom, what was your most favorite model that you ever made, and why did you make it? And the same question for you, Fred.
So thank you, Denny. I want to make a closing comment about the previous. As far as the layout question you asked, we made a conscientious decision to go with the museum, let people see it, let people learn about it. Lots of shows have layouts, and we can support each other. Also, as Adam brought out, the future is marketing, to get the young people. But guys, don't be surprised if little kids like trains and then they go away and they come back, in their 20s and 30s and 40s. Because realistically, this is, a hobby that may be inspired when they're young, but it's not a hobby for kids. And I don't say that derogatory, but we're seeing them coming back all the time in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Some of our best customers in brass are in that age bracket. So it's a misrepresentation to assume that there are not younger people getting into it. And Howard's here. He says nobody likes to strive for mediocrity, and that's what this event is about. Let's show them what's out there. Get them interested in it. They're probably not going to buy brass first because none of us did. I remember when Athearn was out of my price league, and I will never forget that. I got my first switch and it was brass and it was Atlas, and I was so thrilled because it was an improvement on what I had. But if you get them into, however they get into trains, they can come back to brass. This is the natural evolution, but it's way up the chain, so it comes a little later in life. Now, thank you. That was a great discussion. Denny, thank you for switching that over. And we do want to kind of answer his question now. So, Tom, here you go. Favorite model?
None. Absolutely none.
You love them all the same?
Well, no. I think when you get in the business, there are so many opportunities out there. I started Overland because I was upset with none of these importers, but other importers that had these catalogs. It's a chance, and we have to be very calculated and make sure that we're making that right choice, right?
Good. Okay, Forrest, let's get Forrest next, please.
Oh, welcome, everybody. Really appreciate your time. A few things with the collection that I have, and especially coming back to the younger generations, and I'll date myself here a little bit. I'm talking people in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s now. But with regard to the electronics, I know one of the things, of course, the models that you're all producing and bringing in are just magnificent. They operate beautifully. The looks, the aesthetics of them are incredible. But coming full circle with sound systems and other electronics that so many of the younger people today almost expect. Are we going to foresee that maybe coming in the future, and maybe having then that generation, what their expectations are with the sounding and with the lights that they see in other models that are in plastic? Are we ever going to see that in the brass industry? The other item is, I'll make a little plug for a model I'd like to see that I'm surprised we haven't seen yet in almost 50 years, and that's a Frisco 1500 series. A very aesthetically pleasing locomotive. Yeah.
Jimmy?
Are we ever going to see one of those again? Thank you.
Well, with the question about the sound, PBL's been doing sound in locomotives since the early 1980s, and we've been putting DCC sound in locomotives since probably about 10 years ago when the original Tsunami came out. And so we've been very successful with that. But at the same time, we're in a different business structure as a lot of these other importers, because they're dealing with the dealers on the project where we deal with our customers. And you would not believe the amount of technical support and problems that we have with these electronic devices. And so a big portion of our time is utilized in maintaining, offering tech support on the phone, and dealing with all this stuff. And it would be very difficult to weave that from an importer to a dealer, because as most dealers these days, they're not stocking dealers. And a lot of them, hobby shops are closing up. There's no place for some somebody to take their model and say, hey, I just erased all the values on my decoder and the thing don't run anymore. And so, once again, if we have to offer tech support on that type of thing, it's going to be increase in cost of models, less time that we have to develop projects, and that type of thing. To say it's never going to happen is not true. It's going to be, drip fed into the system as we go, because it's the market. People want that. We're trying it with the big boys in the HO market to see what happens. But once again, you have to understand we only have 24 hours in a day too, and we want to spend time with our families and do that type of thing. And so we want to, it's a balance, and I think it's something that we'll weave into. But from the electronic side, we have to have reliability on that too. As far as the 1522 goes, keep dreaming, but it may happen.
Broadway Limited has just brought in a hybrid CNOL1. Broadway Limited has just brought in a CNOL1 brass superstructure, which is a quality of what you'd expect from all the builders now, with a die-cast mechanism, sound, this sort of thing, and they've sold the entire run out before they ever produced a model. What do you guys think about hybrids as the future? Or at least
I'll give you my answer. I'll give you my answer is I love technology, and it's wonderful. Craftsmanship never fades. Technology does. We see it in the movie industry. Jurassic Park killed the model makers, and now they're coming back because craftsmanship never fades. Technology does. So for an operator, that's great, and there's a place for it in the hobby. It's a big hobby, but I don't think it's going to replace all brass models. And you know what? The brass is still a bargain. We have a friend back here that we'd like to. Who am I missing? Okay, get wherever Fred's pointing. Dale? Oh yeah, Dale. Brandon, right here. Dale, please.
Dale DeWitt from St. Louis. I would like to refer back to the discussion about reservations. One thing I would like to see as a purchaser of my own collection, and sometimes for other people or friends, very rarely, and I could name a company that does this, but very rarely, other than that company, do we ever get a notice that a model is not going to be built. There are not enough reservations. And I have several people, friends, that set aside money, say, they talk about they're going to build it, and it's been 5 years, and they're still showing in an advertisement, but it's not going to happen. So if you'd come back and say, hey, it's probably not going to happen because we can't get enough reservation, fine. Then they can divert their monetary resources to other
So
models.
Communication, right?
Communication.
And Jack wants to say something to that. And then bring the mic over to this.
I understand your point. The point is that the model will always be built if there's enough people who reserve it and there's enough backing behind it. If there's that backing never comes unless you're well-heeled enough to do it yourself. It's never going to come to fruition. It's just not going to happen. But it's always a potential. It's all about money. It takes money to make these things. If you guaranteed me that we could do 100 of a certain model, I'd build it tomorrow. And I'm sure all these guys would too. It's the same thing. But
I don't feel it's a realistic potential if you've had on a list for, say, 5 years and you haven't got enough reservations. It's not going to be done.
I just did a project that took 5 years from the time I started it until it just came in a week ago. That's 5 years, and my customers stayed with it, and we got it eventually. So, there is hope. If you want to get something built, you got to gather up your friends and make an effort to get it to us so we can know that it's a viable project when we do it.
Well, I'm a collector operator myself, and I agree with you, Dale. If you're going to cancel the project, advertise that you've canceled it. I've only canceled one project so far, and that was the Southern Railway Heavyweight Crescent Limited. I'd love to do it, but I never got enough reservations. Right now on my table, I have another project that I brought here. I've been trying to do it for 15 years. and it's the Rio Grande Zephyr. And if I don't get the reservations for it, I'm going to cancel it. But I agree with you, Dale. If we're going to cancel something, we should tell you, not keep it on the books forever and forever. I hate to bring up another importer, but Mogi. I love his catalog, but there are promises and promises and promises there, and I want a lot of those promises, but I'm never going to see them. And I buy this stuff. So I'm a collector just like you. But I tell Mogi, if you're not going to do it, tell us you're not going to do it. I'm tired of promises.
What's a logical time to kill a promise?
Well, there again, the Rio Grande Zephyr I announced 15 years ago. I'm decided to kill it.
So there you go, Dale. You'll have your answer within 15 years, buddy. Another person who wants to ask a question back here.
Yeah, I'm getting back to, my name is Steve DePinter. I belong to a local club, Elmhurst Model Railroad Club. And my question is you guys were talking about not going into DCC because of the technology changes. Well, what's the problem with putting in directional lighting, which that technology doesn't change much, some LEDs and a damn plug? Let the technology change. We can take plugs in, plugs out. I mean, we're changing our stuff that's in plastic we're taking the regular DCC out, throwing sound in by changing a plug.
And I think
As
a lot
the
of the
technology
importers
changes,
have played with that a little bit. George, did you want to comment to that a little bit?
Yeah, go on.
I think you're on, George.
Going back to sound and electronics, I've been doing O-Scale for 16 years, and starting with the first project I ever did, it was sound equipped and directional lighting and all the rest of it, and we've slowly progressed. And very honestly, I avoided DCC with a passion because despite all the hype saying that it was universally applicable from manufacturer to manufacturer, it's not. And there are a lot of difficulties and technical glitches associated with particular brands. The last locomotive I delivered was DCC equipped. But in order to make that move, I received basically a guarantee from the manufacturer that they were going to provide the technical support necessary to make certain that my customers were happy, either whether I did it myself or if they had to get directly involved. And that made a huge difference, and people have been absolutely thrilled with it. And the next projects I do, I fully anticipate incorporating DCC in it, because that's the wave of the future, at least for now.
the thing that I was getting at is some people were saying that the technology changes, so we don't want to really get involved in all of that. But if you're putting it in a plug where it says it's DCC ready, we're not going to support the DCC, but whatever company DCC unit you decide to use,
I think
as a customer,
hand up first on that.
Whatever I want to do.
And that's
I wouldn't hold the brass manufacturer to any kind of support other than it's an isolated motor and it's got LEDs with directional lighting. You know, that's on a little board. It's on everything plastic. All you have to do is plug in whatever DCC decoder that I want to put in it, and then the technical support that I need for that decoder, the manufacturer that I has to go to. I'm perfectly fine with it.
Hi. One of the things when I started, which was only 7 years ago, so I'm a real youngster in Korean brass with these guys. In the UK, a lot of people were still DC, and DCC was still like, oh, I don't want to do it. And then it changed over time, and because I originally offered DC or DCC, now it's just everything is DCC, but you can put a little plug in my engines, and it just makes them DC and nothing else, just analog. And probably the biggest problem with the brass stuff is you've got to design all this in from day one. So what I did with my very first project, even if a customer didn't have DCC, I still had all the wiring, I had the speakers, everything was there for that purpose. So if you said, actually, I want a decoder, all I had to do was put a decoder in the tender and it was done. But that's not really where the problem is. The problem is that you can access the CV values in a decoder, and customers sometimes like to play with these things, and that can screw up the running. You change one value and it changes a lot of other values. And as Jimmy was saying, that can eat up a lot of time for the importer dealing with a customer that doesn't really understand what they're doing. So one of the things you can do, I program my decoders. that if you mess it up, you just do CV8 and it takes it back to my settings, because there's no point, I use ESU, there's no point in you calling ESU. That won't help you because they don't know what my settings are. I don't use cams in my models. We actually do the synchronization with the decoder because I found that the most reliable way to do it, because if you have springing, cams and things can be unreliable. So really, a lot of it is about the customers beginning to understand, and as George said, DCC is not as simple as it's been. Not as simple as it's been portrayed. It's not just simply two wires and everything is happy. With DCC short circuits, you maybe pick a model up, you touch the sandpipes on the wheel, the smallest little short circuit, that's a problem for DCC. For DC, it'll run and it'll spark. So DCC is much, much more sensitive. You can have, for example, I've had a customer who tried to run an engine with a short circuit, and what happened is he basically created such a high current, he burnt out the decoder, and that becomes an issue as well. So you have customers that don't really understand DCC, and you then have to spend time changing decoders. Now, the decoder manufacturer will change a decoder for you, but it's still your job to do it in the model, and that's time, that's money, that's shipping, that's effort. So I think what has to happen for the future is customers need to understand what DCC is actually about. It's not just two wires and everything is great. So there has to be more education. When you're doing it in a brass model, you know, if you do 100 brass models, you have to supply your builder with 100 decoders, all programmed, all ready to go. So, you know, there's a lot of expense and effort there.
I'm going to get Fred. Lee.
Like it's getting away from my
Yeah, Lee, we're going to actually have two more comments, and then we appreciate the feedback is great because these guys will take it. But Fred, go ahead.
Really, I want to answer your question. For the last 7 years, these two gentlemen here have made DCC-ready models. They are ready to install DCC. They have not put the decoders in them because, again, you guys are all unique. No. You know what I'm saying. We can't please everybody, but we make the models DCC ready, and they have been doing it, and I know Boo Rim has been doing it. So for the last 7 years, they have been DCC ready. Now, the problem is the older models. You know you got to take out those open frame motors and put can motors. You guys know that stuff.
I'm at 125 refits now.
Well, you want to come over to my house? I got 300 more for you.
Thanks, Fred. Jack, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I want to say you probably missed my thing about trying the first DCC-equipped engine back in when I did the Trainmaster. That's got to be over 10 years ago. Since that time, and I sent it back because it ran backwards and the lights came on in the wrong direction. But since that time, everything has had a DCC plug in it and has been essentially DCC ready. The other thing that you don't realize is that 85% of these models, is that correct, sit on the shelf? They are never run. And so we have to ask our customers, you put a motor in it for a resale because it may go to somebody who wants to run it. But essentially, a lot of these things sit in boxes, unfortunately, or out on the shelf. And the customer who's already paying a lot of money does not want to pay another $150 to $200 for something that may or may not be reliable, may or may not be what you want to put in the model. They don't want to pay that to have it sit on the shelf. Maybe in the resale, it's worth it, and then everybody has their own opinion about which DCC is better, which sound is better. It goes on and on, you know. So that's just part of the problem that we're looking at here.
I get that because I've got 7 shades and only one of them has sound. The rest of them sit in my glass case.
There you go. Okay, there you go.
Thank you for the question, though. Howard, could we have Mike, please?
I'm Howard Zane. I got a question for you folks. We all know there's a very large collectible art market, and what you folks produce, import, and build is fine art. But yet I have found over the last 40 years that brass is the finest, or actually the most incredibly largest secret among the collectible art world. Have any of you actually thought about marketing your products beyond model railroading?
Thank you. Good question. You want to start it, Chuck?
This one working? Yeah. First of all, I want to compliment Dan and Roland and the whole press team, BrassTrains.com team, because I think this day, this evening, and tomorrow is all about exactly that point. This is the seed that's being planted to begin increasing awareness of brass models as art and collectible, and in my case, runnable. I run the wheels off of mine. And I thank you guys for putting this whole thing together. And I'm looking forward to more years and a blossoming of the rose, so to speak.
Thank you, Chuck. And I'd like to ask Seiho, how do you feel knowing that many people view what you produce as art? How does it make you feel?
My first experience about the model train is so long time history from Sam Hongsa. My design, first time I am starting just a design man, crafted by hand, and right now it's improvement by AutoCAD, 2D, then 3D, and everything is improving.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, good. Good voice. Now, our design is very important for everything. Your question is some friend question to us for installation about the DCC and some another technical question. Especially at this time, like Jimmy's project and the PBL. If you installation about some DCC decoder, sometimes no room. All of the electric connector and the DCC ready installed in model, but impossible sometimes because no room. Because first time we need make a room, a space room for DCC. That's right. Yeah. Then no problem for everything. Running electronic connection, everything is no problem. No, without DCC ready. Some boiler inside have many spots for soldering and no room. Do you understand? But we are doing everything inside cleaning for enough room for DCC. And we have many experience about the DCC ready. Yeah. There's some.
Howard, going back on point, and I really enjoyed Seiho's explanation of why it's difficult for him to do DCC installs. But getting back to your point about the elevating this as a collectible, with the Rich Knopf collection that we did at Sotheby's many years ago, it did create that interest. And again, I go back with Chuck's comments to Dan Glazier, and I commend him. This is what this is all about. We are trying to tell the world, that these are works of art. These gentlemen create works of art. This stuff is all done by hand, and it'd be great if we could develop a video to show you how this stuff is really made. And, we joke about the young girls making this stuff, but it is really true that these girls, originally at Sam Hongsa, it was a trade program for them. They brought these girls and young men in from the farms, and they developed the skill of making models. And from that, it was a trade program that they went on to Hyundai and all the other big corporations and went to work for them. So the government in Korea developed this program. Chan Her's company was middle company in 2000, but he got an award from the Korean government for a training program. So it is a aspect of art. It really is art in the finest form, because they're creating this stuff and they're doing it by hand. And if you would see the patience they have. My greatest thing was, and she still works for the factories, it's a she's not a young lady anymore. When I met her, she was a young lady. But she made the painting corrections on models. She used a one-hair brush. And if it was just out of line, she took that one-hair brush and made it straight. And I always admired her work. I always go over there and watch her do this. One hand just whoom, and makes it right. So it's craftsman at its finest level, and it is an artisan, and really, Howard, it's fantastic.
So, can I just make a comment as well? This is something that we've talked about in the UK, and I think the guys that have put this show on, I'd love to have something like this in the UK, because it is an art form. It's absolutely an art form. You can call it sculpture if you like. It's sculpture and brass. What's the difference? Basically, people that sculpture metal or sculpture in brass. It's highly dedicated craftspeople. The pinstriping on my passenger car, for example, a lot of that is done by hand. Now, you can't just get Joe off the street to do that. It takes years and years of training and experience to be able to do this stuff. So it is absolutely an art form. So this convention that we've got here, I agree with the panel that it's so important to really push this stuff. It's not just toy trains. We're not just playing trains. This is what brass is all about. This is really the core of brass. Is absolutely an art form. This is what you're buying ultimately, and I'd love to have something like this in the UK. Honestly, this is.
We want to get Seiho the mic one more time. We have to wrap it up pretty soon, but yeah, and then we'll get to Fred. Go ahead.
Okay. If I make just like same as real prototype, that is just a mechanical. But all over my mind is like artist, some famous artists, there's a Picasso and some of the many professional artists. If not have a mind like them, that is just machine and just a toy. But all of my thinking is, how can I make like art? Yeah, always thinking.
No. Before you do that, John, let me just tell a story. Let me tell a story, please. And this is about a gentleman, Mr. Sofui, as we call him, Sofui-san. Sofui-san was the master builder for Katsumi. We all know Katsumi, that old company. This is back in Japan. And again, I told you I'm older than dirt. I got the privilege of going over to Sofui-san's garage and watching him work. And the tools he had was a Singer sewing machine converted into a lathe, a Singer sewing machine converted into a drill press. I mean, this is all old hand school technology. And this is going right where Howard's going to go. This is art at its finest. When he soldered something, he used his mouth. He blew into this tube and really did the old school soldering that Seiho knows very well. But to watch this man work, it was a treasure to me. And I have a videotape of him working. He had a sake glass here, he had an ashtray there, and he was doing the work. He would puff on his cigarettes and take the sake, and believe it or not, he'd pass out. Nothing wrong with that. And then he'd wake up a couple hours later, taking it away. Now you know where I learned this. But this was watching a Picasso work. Like, Sejo said, I watched this master builder making these fine models for us, and I was just in awe watching him do this. And I got to do this for at least 4 years. I mean, I would take trips to Japan just to go visit Mr. Safui-san and watch him build models and pass out.
Fred, I want to comment. I agree with you completely, but if you are going to market art, you have to market the artisan, and nobody's doing that. In the old days of GEM, if you looked at GEM's boxes, the Olympia stuff, there was a card in there that identified everybody who worked on the model. Tokino had a cloisonne plate on the bottom of the locomotives. A cloisonne plate on the bottom of the locomotive. Think about it. That's identifying it as an art object. Nobody's doing that today. The other thing is mahogany boxes to put them in. Now, there's some people who are doing things like that. But I think most of the people here are thinking of this stuff like soybeans.
John, we used to do this with telephones. What do we do now?
Yeah, you don't even push buttons. Yeah, but I'm saying if you want to market art, you've got to think of it as art, and you've got to market it to people like it is art.
But also you have to market it outside the model railroading hobby, which I've had the opportunity to do a couple of times, going to very collectible antique shows, that sort of venue. And bottom line is it boils down to dollars and cents. It's all of us, we've got X number of dollars that we can afford to spend for advertising. So where do we spend the advertising dollar? Do we spend it with the model railroad industry, or do we say, no, we're not going to spend it there, we're going to spend it and spend basically half a year's advertising budget to put an ad in Arts and Antique magazine, which is essentially what that would cost. So it's not that many of us are not aware, but it's a cost factor involved in marketing to those potential buyers. And the greatest avenue and the cheapest avenue to do that is the internet. And the bottom line is probably 80% of my customers have never, ever been to a model train show and never will go to a model train show. And many of those people are not model railroaders. And I was talking to Dan about that. Those are the people that the Brass Expo needs to begin to address. The Brass Expo needs to go out beyond the model railroading hobby, not to the exclusion of them and not to ignore them, but to draw in some of these other collectible type people that are interested in art.
Thank you, George. And guys, we're going to wrap it up. We got one last customer, but along that, remember, this is live streaming. All these people that are helping share this videos are going online. That's the idea, Howard. We're going to get it out there, and we got to start somewhere. And I mean, it's been started, but we're going to get it up more. One last comment, and then we're going to close it up.
Listen, I'm nothing but a collector, but I want to honor the actual icons of the hobby, and I want you to all stand up and take a standing ovation.
Go ahead, guys. Go ahead.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
I got my SAG card, so do I get union wages for this?
Of course. Same ones you've been getting all along. Thank you, everybody. We've seen some nice communication is needed. We know sometimes there's a language barrier. It's hard to get your thought across, but we thank our builder friends. Yeah. We got at least 60% of what you said, Lee, so it's all good. Yeah. And the communication's a start. You know, we can see the passion the men have for it, and obviously the passion the collectors have. And so it's a great event to be part of. Thank you. Let's spend the next, we have a little time left. Let's just spend it mingling. This debate can rage on into tomorrow, but it's going to be on a one-on-one basis. Thanks again.